And again, when we talk about multiple childhood adverse childhood experiences, right? So they may be experiencing this on a daily basis, a weekly basis, and they are again stunted in their emotional growth. When we talk about social emotional learning, these children need that, but obviously when they are in that same environment and they get it over and over again, they are going to continue to have the problems instead of being on a healing journey. They're basically in a loop, and the behaviors are exacerbated by that. To get real with each other. You're not okay just because you're living, just because you're breathing doesn't make you okay. Are you able to handle conflict in a productive way? Do you always feel like you got to defend yourself? You always have to fight people. I feel like you're about to fight. I mean, ask yourself real questions. Hey, thank you for joining us for another episode of the Falling for Learning podcast. Please hit the subscribe button. We're here for you. And you want to stick with this channel if you have teens and tweens, or you're a caregiver, right? You might be a parent, you might be a caregiver, and you want to know what to do to keep them on track for learning and to stay on track for success. Hit the subscribe button. I'm so glad that you've joined us today. So, I am going to today get into a topic that's really serious and I don't think we talk about enough as a country. There's a video that I watched called Leave My Mother Alone. Full video. Little girl defends mother against police. So, this is what I'm going to talk about this video. Self-Aware TV, this YouTube channel, um, recorded this video or shared the video where the little girl who is really just having a meltdown, a lot of yelling and screaming. She's even threatening the police, saying that she's going to kill someone, that she's going to slap someone. And I just really thought it was important that I highlight some of what's going on in the video. A lot of us who don't work with children or who even don't work in certain environments don't understand what is going on with children when they have major meltdowns and behavior problems. Now, this video is showing this girl going through what we call adverse childhood experience. And in the video, she also is disclosing that she's had more than a couple of adverse childhood experiences. For example, she is witnessing her mother being arrested by the police. Now, she tells her mother that she knows who did it. It wasn't her mom. They are over the radio saying what this person was wearing, the suspect, nothing like what her mom is wearing. Her hair isn't the same, the clothes isn't the same, but she's saying it was her aunt who did it. Okay. And then she says, on my dead father, right? And I'm not really putting it in chronological order, in the order that it happened. But so we know in adverse childhood experiences, these are negative things that happen to children that cause trauma. And it's not just that's the end of it, but it causes them to stunt their growth emotionally. Emotionally, they are not able to handle situations because of these negative experiences that they go through, these traumatic experiences. So, death is one of them. Now, we don't even know what the reason is that her dad died, like the cause of death, but death by itself is a traumatic experience, right? So, she's saying, on my dead father. So, her dad has died, and we don't know what it was that happened. Because if it's something like, and I'm not saying this is what happened to the girl, I'm just giving general information about adverse childhood experiences. So if it was, for example, death by suicide, that is a traumatic experience on top of a traumatic experience, or if someone else killed him, that violence. And sometimes kids witness some of this violence, right? They may see the dead family member or something like that, in the aftermath of the violence. And that is trauma on top of trauma. So, adverse childhood experiences that cause trauma could be And I'm not an expert on this, and I'm not suggesting that I am, but I am an educator who works with students in various settings. And I've learned this myself through my teaching experience. And I spent some years working at a school that was more affluent, more of a choice school where choices, people had a choice to go, or, of course, they could be uninvited to that particular school. And so it was a bit of a shelter from some of this. But when I've moved around, I have experienced where there are multiple children in a room who are suffering from adverse childhood experiences, and the behaviors are extreme. And sometimes people want to blame all of that on a parent or a teacher, right? But it's not necessarily a parent or teacher's fault, depending on what happened, right? So we talked about one of the adverse childhood experiences, which is death, and how that could be compounded by violence or, suicide or, homicide. Um, of course, if they witness the violence, that's again another type of trauma. So kids who are in homes where there is um, domestic violence, of course, that is an adverse childhood experience. And again, when we talk about multiple adverse childhood experiences, right? So they may be experiencing this on a daily basis, a weekly basis, and they are, again, stunted in their emotional growth. When we talk about social emotional learning, these children need that. But obviously, when they are in that same environment and they get it over and over again, they are going to continue to have the problems instead of being on a healing journey. They're basically in a loop, and the behaviors are exacerbated by that. According to Rafa, right? I went to a Rafa, this website, rafa.org. Um, it talks about adverse childhood experiences. I'm just going to give an overview of it. Um, Again, negative things that are happening, of course, emotional abuse. Um, of course, if it is some type of sexual abuse, um, even parents separating is a traumatic experience. And even though parents may, try to make it as nice as possible or amicable as possible, it is traumatic for that living situation to be changed, or for, just the breaking up of the family. Um, and so the number one thing is we need to be educated about this. Educators need to be educated about, parents need to be educated about it, because they don't know the damage that they're doing to a child. And children are not like adults. They are not able to articulate what's happening, or what they don't like, or whatever, but we'll see it. We'll see them acting out. We'll see them acting younger than they maybe should. They're crying a lot, they're having meltdowns or tantrums or whatever you want to call it, but they are not reacting normally. They will have triggers. They may react violently to things that seem to be very small. And this is because of adverse childhood experiences. Again, some kids, it's something that happened a long time ago, and no one is taking the time to help them recover and heal from it. And sometimes they are dealing with it over and over and over again. If they're with a home where there's domestic violence, where there's parents who are arguing and fighting with each other, um, the arguing and the screaming, even though there may not be violence involved, is also adverse childhood experiences. So again, I'm going to link in the show notes some more resources for you to find out about this. But a lot of times people who don't know will just look at the kids. And again, these are kids under the age of 18, right? In the video that I'm referring to, the girl is a very small girl. She seems to just be petite. I don't think she's that young, but I really can't tell. I would say she was 10, around the age of 10. Now, I am not sure. She is what people in the comments are saying, she's acting like a grown woman, or she's arguing like a grown woman. And of course, we know that obviously she's seen someone react in this way to something, and she's acting out, enacting something that she's seen before. Um, but it's very clear that she is traumatized, that they are taking her mother away. And she, she said at least her aunt is the one who did the stealing, who committed the theft, and her, dad has passed away, and again, we don't know why. So to be in an environment where you are seeing people committing crimes on a regular basis, I mean, I don't know if it's a regular basis, but I'm just wanting people to try to understand, we, instead of labeling kids as bad or whatever, we need to understand what they're going through. They do not know how to act and behave, and they will mirror the actions of people they see around them, right or wrong. um, they will be, reacting to things in an immature way, a way that they should not be acting. People say you shouldn't be like this. You're 10 years old, you're 11, you're whatever. But it's what they're going through, is how they know how to respond. And even giving kids the language, right? If they can get counseling to get language about, I'm feeling very upset right now, maybe they wouldn't lash out and yell or lash out and hit and act in violence towards people or threaten people. But this is what they have to work with. This is what they're going to do. They are in the fight or flight mode, meaning that they are always looking to defend themselves. So, like I said, you may see kids react in a way that is like out of pocket, you feel like, for a small thing that happens or something that someone said. But that's what they have, they're just ready to defend themselves instead of saying, why did you say that? Or that wasn't nice. Maybe where you would see a kid normally reacting, they're like ready to beat up someone. I've seen kids just leap out and just start hitting someone, running after someone, when we have heard just a very small word that they were called or something. But they have some emotional turmoil where they're not able to respond well, and they are just defending themselves. They are in that fight or flight mode. They are stressed out all the time. And Connie Rice, I believe is the name of the person, has done, it was actually Condoleezza Rice's cousin, did some research about children who had multiple adverse childhood experiences. And what they're dealing with is um, similar trauma, PTSD, that soldiers who were in combat had faced. So just imagine, right? So we're talking about how horrible these kids are, but we really need to be advocating for them to get services and help. And here's the problem with that. Obviously, all over the United States, 75% of children don't know how to write well. Add that to the fact that so many people out there are trying to silence the voices of those who have been oppressed and trying to prevent them from telling their story. Who's going to tell your story? If your child doesn't know how to write well, I have two books to address this issue: The Rewrite Method and The Rewrite Method Workbook, written to make sure that parents know what to do, that educators know what to do to get their children to write better, and just not write better, but love to write. Make sure that your next generation could tell their story and they won't be silenced. Go to fallingforlearning.com today to purchase your set. If a child is experiencing multiple adverse childhood experiences, they call them ACEs. So let's just take it to ACEs. um, a lot of times their parents are creating this environment, or their parents are victims in this environment. The parents don't have the social and emotional skills to deal with it. And they're very fearful of authority, meaning that they won't go get them counseling. They're worried that someone's going to take their kids if they hear about what's happening. If they're, so it's a lot of compounded um, trauma. And of course, we always talk about generational trauma, right? There's a lot of compounded trauma. And the whole family needs help a lot of times, right? Um, But actually getting them to trust authority, right, is very difficult. They don't trust authority. They don't trust that anyone's going to be able to help them. And here's another thing that I really want to say about this. A lot of times people feel like they're fine. Victims of trauma, people who've undergone trauma, who've been through generational trauma, they're like, I'm doing fine. And if we dig into that fine, if we dig into that fine, what we'll find when we dig into the fine, where they're saying, I'm okay, I'm all right, I'm doing fine. If we dig into it, what we will find is that they're alive. They still got their senses, they're walking, talking, listening, speaking, feeling, touching, seeing, all those things. And so, yeah, they're doing fine. But actually, they're not, because you'll see that they are having these same problems at work, where they're going off on people, where they are going off on their kids, where they are not able to maintain relationships. It's just that, they're emotional. They are always defensive. And so they feel like they're fine because that's their normal. But just because we're still living, and of course, if you've dealt with these ACEs, you've dealt with this trauma, people may be dead and you're still there and you're like, I'm doing good. But that doesn't mean you're doing good just because you're alive. You still could be in need of healing. You could still be in need of support and a shoulder to cry on, and even processing your feelings. But if you aren't used to people who do that process your feelings or talk about it or reflect, right? Then you feel like, because I'm still here, I'm fine, and you're not. And then we think our children should be fine. And then, of course, if our kids aren't saying, I feel this way, I feel that way, then they're fine, and they're not. So, low hanging fruit, if you're not really open to counseling, I would say get counseling. But if you're not open to counseling, if you're definitely not open for your kid to get counseling, you should get counseling yourself. You should get counseling yourself. Most people who are doing well and who are thriving, I'm not just saying surviving, because that's what a lot of people are talking about when they're saying they're okay and they've been through all this trauma. I'm saying thriving, doing well, well adjusted, taking care of themselves, in good health, right? Uh, they are going to counseling. They have gone to counseling. They are making moves that are restorative and healing to themselves. So that's what we really need to understand. You can't just say that you're okay and think and be surprised. My kid isn't doing okay. What's wrong with my kid? Because you are passing down that trauma. And this is another thing we need to really talk about. Trauma is not just one person, right? As a parent, you pass on the trauma to your child. I do want to say there are studies that even if your child is in a well-adjusted, nice home where there's no, problems, that, none of these big issues, that you could still pass on your trauma. There is research that it goes through 3 generations. So these unspoken hurt. So, your child may be depressed and you're like, why is my child depressed? I have this for them. I have that for them. We have a nice home. We have this. Because you're depressed, because you're dealing with something that you have not spoken, you have not healed from. And there's ways of passing it down, even in just our interactions, where you may not be yelling at me. Like, sometimes parents ignore their kids. They're not there for them. They're not emotionally available for them. And so I don't have to yell at you or call you a name, but I could just not be there for you. I could just ignore you when you're talking. I could just tell you, this is not a big deal, and brush it off. and just fail to be emotionally available and there for you. And that is a problem. And so the kids who are sometimes depressed and everything, and it's something we got to talk about this, because it is life or death sometimes, right? This little girl in this video, I mean, my heart goes out to her. And I also feel like how blessed she is, because she is such a little girl. And I meaning petite and small. I didn't ever see them try to put hands on her or like do anything, but she was threatening them. She was saying, I'm about to kill somebody. I'm going to knock somebody in the face or something, punch someone. Again, I'm not quoting, but imagine if she was bigger, right? Because I don't think she was that young. I just think she's a very petite girl. And they didn't ever feel threatened by her, luckily, because they definitely could have slammed her to the ground, held a gun up to her, whatever, because she was saying threatening things. I didn't ever see her swing at them or anything like that. Thank goodness. And thank goodness she seemed to be unharmed physically. Of course, emotionally, that's what we're talking about. It was another adverse childhood experience or an ACE that she was experiencing. But obviously, if that was a boy that had another 12 inches on him or something, they could have acted very differently towards him. But they didn't do that towards the girl, and thank goodness. But she doesn't know how to cope in that situation. Who knows how to cope when their parents are getting arrested? And then she was saying, my mother didn't do it. She doesn't match the description. And it was so unfair for her. She just couldn't imagine them arresting her. And they did arrest the mother, but she just like, this is, leave her alone, get away from my mom, no one better touch, you know what I mean? It was just, she had no way to process what was happening in a productive way or to communicate in a productive way. She tried not to even curse. She was like, mother effing, like sometimes she cursed and sometimes she used letters. It's just a sad situation. And so she was okay, right? Like physically okay. Again, if it was another kid, another size, whatever, handled totally differently. But kids who are getting this generational trauma and this ongoing trauma happening, we are seeing, Black boys have a high suicide rate, the highest. And it starts as the age of 10, Um, and it's so, it's so sad. Um, and that's boys who are completing suicide, but we know, some of us know boys out there that are doing things and they don't care if they live or die. Like they're doing things because they don't care. They don't see the value in continuing to live. And so, us getting to the bottom of these issues and talking about these underlying causes is not just something fun to do, but it's essential to do and to get real with each other. You're not okay just because you're living, just because you're breathing doesn't make you okay. Are you able to handle conflict in a productive way? Do you always feel like you got to defend yourself? You always have to fight people. I feel like you're about to fight. I mean, ask yourself real questions. And going back to some low hanging fruit, getting your self counseling. And then the other part of that is actually journaling and writing out what's happening in your mind, in your heart, and in your body, because we have these physical responses to these emotional traumas, right? Our, I know my scalp starts sweating if I start getting hot, like upset. Of course, people cry and they may cry a lot. Some people may cry and they may cry a lot, which causes, obviously a lot of disruption. Some people are yelling at people, screaming at people. So just check in on what's happening. I remember when I was in a situation very upset about something, I felt like I was being treated unfairly. And my Apple Watch was, my heart was racing. And it was alerting me like your Apple Watch, your heart rate has gone up. And I was just sitting there. And I had to speak up on a situation because what's happening when we just keep things in, obviously we bubble over. And we bubble over is like an eruption in a very unhealthy way. And so I thought to speak in this professional setting about how I felt. And it wasn't that what people wanted to hear, but it was said in a professional way. It was said in a direct way. And, people want you to be quiet. They want you to sit there and be uncomfortable sometimes when in fact they are doing things to be disruptive and they want to make you mad. But, there's ways to handle it. So again, journaling about what you feel, how your body's feeling, why you feel that way, how you reacted, and even giving yourself some kudos for not going off or cursing out people or whatever, or actually going to counseling when you didn't feel like going will mean a lot. And then thinking about your kids, you got to have conversations and open dialogue with them. And you have to talk to them about what challenges you face. Because I remember as a child, and a lot of people feel this way, like I'm the only one going through this. I'm the only one feeling this way. And of course, it's very isolating. And this is why, we see people completing suicides because they feel like there's no way that this problem is going away. They're not going to stop feeling this way. They're not going to be able to get past this. And they feel like that's their way out. And of course, there's more ways for them to be out. But again, feeling isolated, they're the only one facing this problem or who could deal with this problem does make them feel like there's nothing else to do. So you have to open up about what you're going through. I felt like I was treated unfairly. And so this is what I did. This is what I said. And I knew that if I did it this way, I would be in trouble. So this is why I did it this way. I chose to do this. And, you know, I did yoga today because I was feeling stressed. I went for a walk today when I was feeling like I needed to explode, but I went for a walk or I cleaned something, right? There's more than one way to deal positively with negative experiences. Um, but if you're not thinking about it and being reflective about it, then you're going to fly off the handle or your child's going to fly off the handle. But you have to teach them new ways and you have to talk to them. Sometimes they're feeling hurt and it comes off as anger and defensiveness. And then you just need to say what you feel. Just say what you feel, right? And help them. It sounds like you're feeling frustrated. Sounds like your feelings are hurt because of this. It sounds like you're sad because of this. So helping them articulate the words, the feelings, sitting in that uncomfortability, letting them know that they're not the only one that feels this way, that this is normal to feel upset. What the part that's not normal, that we don't want to normalize, is being violent, reacting violently, yelling, screaming, tearing up things, hitting things, and again, you could do something that's more constructive, like boxing or something like that with that pent up energy. But trying to channel these emotions in a positive way is really important, and acknowledging that they're feeling hurt, they're feeling sad, and then helping them to recover. But the silence is a killer. Silently acting as if everybody is okay because they're living, because they're breathing, is not okay. And that's how we'll have more kids, completing suicides. More kids that are growing up to be angry and violent. So we have to talk about the negativity, the negative childhood experiences, and this rafa.org has reports, and I'll put it in there, where you could access their resources, where you could do positive childhood experiences to help balance out that negativity, and again, how to grow and heal from these experiences. Um, hopefully that girl gets some healing, um, and someone is able to give her the resources that she needs, because she obviously needs the resources. I don't know if people are like, well, her mom's out of jail now, or whatever the case. I don't know. I'm just making things up. And just think, oh, she's okay. She's fine. Just don't mess with her mom anymore or whatever. It's like she does need some help. She needs some support. She's not reacting in a normal way to something. And that wasn't a normal situation. So I'm not blaming her, but a lot of people on there like how bad the kid is, how whatever, whatever. And they really need to know that when you do have these negative experiences after negative experiences, and I just want to say negative experiences because that sounds like very mild, but trauma, it stops you in your tracks from developing. You have these gaps in your ability to adjust. And again, that directly ties and correlates to school. Are you able to learn when you feel like you have to fight? When you feel like you are having to defend yourself, when you are not feeling safe? There's things that are more important than education, and that is feeling safe. That's feeling safe. If I'm crying and sad and upset, what am I learning? What am I able? I'm able to write a report. I'm able to learn about science. No, I'm just dealing with my emotions. I want to make sure I feel safe. I want to make sure that I am in a good place emotionally. I can't even think. I've tried, and when I'm upset, trying to do something, I'm shaking. I'm upset. It doesn't work. And this isn't me talking about myself as an adult trying to push through. Kids aren't able to do that. And it's unfair to ask them to, because other kids are dealing with just kid stuff. My friend rolled their eyes at me, or I wonder if my friend Kelly's upset, or, just really simple things. But other kids are dealing with death, suicide, violence, domestic abuse, parents separating, all these things. And you're just supposed to go to school. You should be doing what you're supposed to do. It doesn't really work that way. I just want to end this with saying that, adverse childhood experiences are something that adverse childhood experiences are situations that cause trauma for kids. And if they're not addressed, they will suspend their ability to grow, and their social emotional coping mechanisms are stunted by that. We need to recognize it when it happens. We need to teach children how to articulate their emotions. We need to get them counseling. We need to help them journal. We need to, as parents, talk about our own traumatic events. Now, I don't want to say get into the nitty gritty about everything, right? But things that make sense for them to know about, and how you're dealing and coping and healing. You need to have a conversation with your children, because you are passing on your trauma to them if you don't deal with your own trauma. And you know what I mean. You know if you've experienced trauma or not. Just breathing and living is not being okay. We want you to thrive. We want your children to thrive. You want your children to thrive. So that means we need to get past that baseline of, I'm okay because you're here, because you're living, because you didn't die and someone else did. Doesn't mean that you're okay. And you have to deal with that. And I would say get counseling. Now, I'm going to have a professional on the show to talk about this in more detail, but I really want you to know that there's a name for this stuff, for these issues, and there's a reason why these situations keep happening, and there's a way to deal with it in a productive way. So again, thank you for joining us. Stick with us. We'll help you to make sure your children are on track for learning and stay on track for success. Have a great week. Thanks again for supporting the Falling for Learning podcast. New episodes go live every Saturday at 5 p.m. You can watch us on youtube.com at Falling for Learning or listen on all major podcast platforms such as Apple, Google, Audible, Spotify, and much more. For more resources, visit fallinginlovewithlearning.com. We really appreciate you. Have a wonderful week.